Hello, this is Raul Ramirez of the Catch Wrestling Alliance, where we help you elevate your grappling so together we can keep real wrestling alive. And it's been a little while since we did our last live stream podcast thing. Um, so, um, we're back basically. Hopefully, we can keep doing this weekly and stuff. But yeah, it's been a while. Just a bunch of things have been coming up, so I apologize for not being regular because I do get comments and even some emails and stuff. So a bunch of people appreciate this content. So I want to keep doing it. I always wanted to keep it regular, but just all these different things came up, around the holidays and the beginning of the new year and stuff. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get back to the content. So I want to kind of give some updates. We had um, some seminars that we did for one of the Gracie Baja affiliates here in Los Angeles. So we're always open to doing seminars. So if you want to bring us out to wherever you are, like we did tons of seminars in Singapore, et cetera, et cetera. So we also have our classes continuing at UCLA. Those are going well. Also, if any of you, so the UCLA ones, that's the university here in Los Angeles, those ones are pretty much just open to students at the moment. So if you're in Los Angeles and you want to come train with us, we're at Fight Science MMA. So that is in the middle of Los Angeles. We call it Mid City, the Mid City area. So you're free to train. Anybody's free to train with us at the MMA studio. So it's called Fight Science MMA. That's on Washington Boulevard. So, feel free to message us, let us know what's going on, or if you want to come train, you're more than welcome. Also, oh yeah, one thing I wanted to talk about, which is really cool, before we get to the subject that we have as to like, and actually the subject we have is actually pretty cool, because a lot of people, there's a lot of like mythology and a lot of speculation as to why we pin in our style, or in just like a lot of wrestling styles. So you have like freestyle and folk style, catch wrestling and stuff, where we have pins. And there's some research that was compiled that talks about the origin of pins in European wrestling styles, and ultimately kind of like Western wrestling styles in general, because all that stuff kind of evolved and then made its way to the United States and our wrestling styles and stuff. So we're going to talk about that, but I want to talk about one new thing for the CWA Academy. So our online academy, where you can learn catch wrestling, especially if you're not in the LA area and you can't train with us. We mention it all the time, but we have our online platform. So through catchwrestlingalliance.com, you can join our online membership. And so basically it's our academy. You become a member, and one thing that has changed on our website, which is really cool, is a new it's like our new community thing. So what it is like it's basically like our chat room. So you can think of it as those of you who use Discord, or even with like was it Facebook groups and stuff like that, but it's way more functional. So it provides like so much value, because what we do, it's like you have chat room functions in there so people can communicate. We also can post videos in there, but it's like an organized way. So also what we do in there is members who ask, so basically if you have questions, we can answer them there, by text and chatting with each other. But then also we'll post a video like of like the kind of like the main question that needs to be addressed. So post a video in there. Plus we can also live stream in there and stuff. So the community function of our CWA Academy on our website just got like way better. And then also you can download an app for it. So you don't necessarily have to log on to your phone, or log on to on your laptop or whatever, a desktop computer. You can just download an app and then access all that stuff. So you can chat and communicate with each other, and and so we can help answer a lot of questions, or you can just talk about, we even talked about different wrestling shoes or whatever. It's all great. All the stuff is free to talk about, but it is so much easier now. So with the updates with our the community function of our website. So if you want, feel free to join. It's just like way better now than it was, because we did have a community like a forum in there, but it didn't have as many functions as it does now, and it's just way better, like so much better. And so it's just tons of extra content. So the way that the academy is set up is so you have like the instructional aspects to it, so where you learn like the fundamental techniques, and then you graduate from the fundamental stuff. But at the same time, we have the community stuff, so that's always providing new content. You can always ask questions and stuff, and so monthly we get at least one like video that's specifically answering your questions, but then we also add other videos and stuff that are just basically based off what people are kind of talking about in the community. So it's a great thing, and it's all it's all us. So it's like all amongst the community itself. So it's just a really cool new thing that's part of our CWA Academy. So really hope you can check it out. But if you're not interested, that's totally fine. We still have our one-off video courses and stuff. So hopefully this year we'll be able to add more of those one-off courses. So if you don't want to join the community, or if you don't want to join our academy, then that's totally fine. But just letting you know, we got a really cool new function, which I think just provides a lot of value and really helps out. So kind of like get more real-time connection. So instead of just instead of only going through the fundamentals courses where you see the techniques and the demonstration and you practice it, in our community, you can just ask questions in real time and get answers, right away. So it's really cool. I really like all the new functions, the new functionality about it and stuff. So we're just gonna keep using it and keep growing everything in there. Okay. So with that being said, so that's all the updates. These are all the different things that have been going on since the last time we had a live stream. So it took a few minutes to talk about that, but let's go ahead and get to our subject. And by the way, so anybody watching this live, go ahead and comment. If you're watching this live on our Twitch or on our YouTube stream, feel free to comment and try to get to your questions. But what is linked in the description box is a link to this article that I'm going to be talking about. So it's by the historian Ruslan. God, I have to look at the spelling of his last name. Pashayev. So Ruslan Pashayev, who spent a lot of time researching the development of wrestling in Europe, and then with the emphasis on the development of catch wrestling, or catch as catch can, right? So he has an article that kind of that shows like how pins evolve. So in modern catch wrestling competition, so like what we have in our organization, and also Wigan, or the Snake Pit Wigan, their organization, how we do the pin is a 2-second pin where two shoulders are touching the mat same time. The referee counts 2 seconds, and then that's it. All right. So over time, you see like in pro wrestling, you'll see this big thing where it's like they mark like 1, 2, 3. All that stuff is for show, so that the competitors know when to kick out of the pin if they're going to continue, or if they're going to continue the predetermined match. So all that stuff, like the pounding on the mat and stuff like that, that's definitely for show. But in our competition, so in real wrestling, you see like the ref isn't always just counting off the the pin or whatever. It's just like all they have to do is count 2 seconds in their head and blow the whistle and end it, right? So where did that come from? Where did that whole notion come from? Well, it's pretty old, right? So and this, I kind of wanted to talk about this because we get all these different weird theories as to like how catch wrestling developed, and it developed not so. So one of the theories that I want to kind of refute that it makes no sense, because since Lancashire, it's called like another name for catch wrestling is Lancashire wrestling. So the wrestling style that developed in that region of England is not necessarily like by the ocean, right? So you get some theories saying like, oh, the sailors of Europe, they brought back all the styles of the best techniques that they learn, and then they develop catch wrestling and whatever. But no, that's it doesn't make so much sense, even when you know the geography and stuff. Kind of one of the closest port cities to that area, right, is Liverpool, which again, it was a major port, and a lot of ships and stuff sailed out of there. But it wouldn't necessarily be a place where like sailors would come and just develop a wrestling style, in that region. So you have to take that into consideration. But anyway, what we see is waves of migration from the mainland Europe, right? So the continent onto the island of England, or the islands, and then across the region. So people moving across, say from these different countries like France and Germany and stuff, into the region of like, so that county is the Lancashire area, right? The Lancashire area. And so it wasn't necessarily like sailors or whatever developing a style on their own, because then that means it would be not just like a regional style, it would be like the national martial art. But again, so that let's just not talk about that anymore, because it's kind of illogical, right? But let's go ahead and talk about um, um, what was kind of happening, hundreds of years ago in wrestling. So you have like the Germans wrestling, you have the French and stuff, all these different like different types of people or different ethnicities doing their kinds of all their different styles. But so you can kind of think like in the mainland or the continent of Europe, you have people doing more of what you can kind of recognize today as like, say, even sumo wrestling. So they were more like a stand-up style, or what you see in kind of Greco. But once you take someone down, no matter how they touch the mat or touch the ground, is done, right? So they lost. So it's mostly like you wrestle standing, and then whoever gets knocked over or whatever, they lose, right? But sometimes then you have like these big, say like in Greco-Roman, where you have these big, lifts and slams. Again, that would be a win, right? Uh, but people were, breaking ribs and, just getting seriously injured. And, maybe every once in a while they could die from their injuries. So um, so something had to change, right? Because, you got to have a sport where people can feel comfortable to compete in. So let's go ahead and try to, let me see where, let's go, because I want to read a little bit from the article. I want to see where we kind of have a good part to, oh yeah, so you have different styles, so different techniques that were emphasized. So let's go ahead and talk about here. So another important detail was that according to the Frankish traditions, the use of legs or feet for throwing, they weren't favored, and wasn't considered fair wrestling. Instead, only true wrestling was fought utilizing the strength of hands, arms, torso, hips, buttocks, and back. By any other word, lift and throw techniques dominated wrestling styles of the ancient Franks, and the noble art of tripping, which was a key wrestling skill in, let's say, English traditional wrestling styles was neglected. The falls, so the pins, basically preferably falls on the back, or even fair back falls given the standing position, were quick flying falls. So basically just you think of a really like modern day, really great example, not necessarily so much Greco, but sumo wrestling, right? So you can get these really cool techniques, really cool throws happening, and that's it, right? You get a win once you get someone to touch another part of their body onto the ground, or you throw them out of the ring or whatever. Then that's a win, right? Uh, so then Ruslan kind of continues, and again, this article is linked in the description. So that's what he just continues here, where the idea of of holding someone and keeping them immobilized, that started to like gain popularity because they wanted to try to have like a way of doing wrestling that was a little bit more like a little bit more like necessarily like because like basically just safer ultimately. So let's see. So uh, okay, so over the course of time, the system was simplified. So a fall on any part of the fall on the back was introduced, and in England, and then to some extent in the continent. All right, um, so flying falls being allowed, which remained unchanged. Wrestling still wasn't a safe game due to the nature of those falls, which were violent and usually caused multiple injuries and even death. Right. So this led to the perception, or the evolution of the perception and understanding of the throw fall itself. At some point, the principle of throwing on the back was replaced with a more progressive idea of placing on the back, pressing shoulders down, and maintaining this submissive position for a certain amount of time. That was achievable only when both wrestlers were down on the ground, and that is how the pinning fall was invented. Right, the revolutionary introduction was the birth of a new Western European tradition of ground wrestling, which found its climax in the concept of a pinning fall being the only true real fall. The game is over when it's over and one of the two is kept immovable, flat on his back. So you've shown your control over that person by having them flat on their back, so face up, and they can't get out. All right, um, so it was truly like it's back and forth between England, so basically the island off the coast of the continent, and what was going on the continent. So over time, this back and forth evolved into this idea of the pin. But so like how we see still today in Greco-Roman wrestling, which again was, so for people who don't know, that was a French style of wrestling. So you have these big takedowns, these big throws and stuff, but over time, in which you can like take them, you can throw someone and have them land onto their shoulders, and you would win. So these kinds of flying or like big throw techniques, I mean, they still exist, right? And they're still really spectacular and fun to watch. But you're starting to see long ago the evolution of the whole idea of control. So not just throwing someone, using some more technique and making sure that you show your dominance over them by immobilizing them, right? You control and restrain them. Right. So there's some other stuff that I think it'd be kind of cool to talk about. Yeah. So he mentions, yeah, like this heavily influenced Greco-Roman, which is one of the important styles because it's in the Olympics still. But then, yeah, so you have this wave. So you have these things kind of developing between this back and forth between England and the mainland. And then you have these waves of immigration happening from Europe across England. And so you get people practicing wrestling in these styles, right? So then when they move from England all the way, move from Europe to England, then that helped the evolution of catch as catch can wrestling. Let me go and try to skip to that part because this is a pretty short article. So the earliest known immigration of Flemish textile workers to East Lancashire, England, goes back to the 1300s. They brought to their new place their traditional rough and tumble wrestling style, which over time, I can't pronounce the name. It's like Stoyan. That's my guess. I should probably write it in the description box. But anyway, their rough and tumble wrestling style, which over time evolved there in Lancashire into the professional Lancashire up and down wrestling fighting, a combative style that predated catch as catch can wrestling. So in that style, you can kind of like kick a little bit. It wasn't like kickboxing. But again, you can never really strike. You can never do like, punches, like closed fist punches. But anyway, we probably should talk about that in another thing. But anyway, so they brought their style, and then these things, keep mixing, right? They keep evolving in the pot, right? So you get people in a certain area. And then you get people from another area coming into this little melting pot area, and then they bring their own styles, and then something evolves, right? So Ruslan continues. So in the 16th and 17th centuries, French and German weaving Protestants, who along with the Flemish fled religious persecutions on the continent, brought their old Frankish catch-hold wrestling customs to East Lancashire and West Yorkshire, where they merged with traditional English catch-hold wrestling styles. And over the course of the centuries, this combination evolved into a new culturally unique style of wrestling, the Lancashire catch as catch can. This style went through the various stages of evolution and gave birth to the modern day catch wrestling or pro wrestling, which again evolved into the modern day pro wrestling. And so, as well as it strongly influenced the current international freestyle wrestling and different grappling styles. So, like, he makes a point of pointing out that, again, freestyle is an Olympic style, and then you have Greco-Roman. Again, it's another Olympic style, but over time, so you have, over the evolution that occurred over hundreds of years, where you get that's why you get the pin in both styles, right? So they're both European styles, but you got the pin because of this back and forth between the island and the continent, and then basically people gradually agreeing that, the pin is enough to show dominance, and not just like big slams and stuff, which are cool and all, but if you can, get someone down on the ground, show that you're dominant by pinning them down, pinning them flat on their back, and they can't get out for a set amount of time, that's enough to show that you dominated that person, so you won the wrestling match, right? So so hopefully that was interesting to you. That's kind of like the main thing that I want to kind of talk about, because this is how you can see, like, by looking back in time, there is evidence kind of showing like how these things came about. And but it's like, once you see like how these things evolved, it's kind of good to understand like this old perspective, and you can see how this not only created the pin, but also shows that since people saw the idea of being able to control and restrain someone and show your dominance by like pinning them, that also translates into our modern grappling, where you'll see even or you'll see like the continued value of learning wrestling, right? So even the amateur styles that have no like submission holds, but you can see how like a lot of jiu-jitsu gurus are even like discussing like the whole notion of pinning someone down or pinning a limb down so that you can move around the body or move around that limb, so you can set up your submission holds and whatnot. So this whole continent of Europe, including the island off the coast, England, they over time, recognized the 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 like the they recognize like the value of restraining someone. And then so say like nowadays, since like submission grappling is so popular, I mean, you can still utilize this idea of submitting, or basically like controlling, restraining someone, and then when they try to move, or you can tire them out, right, depending on your time limit, um, then you can like get them to move the way you need them to move, so you can set up your submission, right? Especially if you do like a submission only competition, they will eventually move the way you need them, right? And then you can set up your submission or whatever the goal of your competition needs to be. So in that way, learning catch wrestling can help like with all these different styles of competition. So even like say like MMA or whatever, right, where truly you can do submissions, but I mean, like, why don't you go for the knockout, right? So if you can hold someone down, right, and you can ground and pound them, get a TKO or whatever, that's awesome. That's awesome. Great. And so, but you're still using the pinning principles, right? So that's one of the cool things about like catch wrestling. You got all these different dynamics kind of happening. But again, yeah, they evolved over like hundreds of years, which is pretty cool. So it's not just like a brand new thing, which reminds me, it's like there was some strange person that was like commenting on one of our social media things where like, I guess they thought it was new. Like they thought catch wrestling was new. So they're like, I've seen these techniques in like freestyle and whatever. And it's like, yeah, definitely. You've seen these techniques in freestyle, because freestyle used to be called amateur catch as catch can. So yes, you've seen a lot of. So anyway, people are strange. So just hopefully what we talked about right now is that it should help people understand that catch wrestling evolved over hundreds of years. It's a back and forth communication, right, and evolution amongst wrestling communities on the island and on the continent. And then you have the pin setup, and then you have these different immigrants crossing to England out of the continent, and then bringing their styles of wrestling. And then so then in the Lancashire region, catch wrestling eventually evolved, right, or eventually kind of developed, right, in their kind of melting pot of different European communities there. It's really interesting though, because it can be cold in Northern Europe, but like England is like even further north. So, and then they're going to the northern part of England, which is like very cold. So, I don't know about you. I grew up in Southern California. Like my my family goes way back, and so anyway, we don't live in a place that's as cold as England. And then you get these people, but then you hear about these people like where they wanted to escape different types of persecution, so they left the continent and onto the islands. And man, it's cold. Well, they're probably used to the cold in there and on the continent, and then so I guess moving even further north wasn't so big of a change. But wow. So that's my personal point of view. So let's go ahead and get a couple of your comments here. So let's see. The first one here, Gridiron Masters. So do catch and judo share a history? Do they exchange ideas? Well, yes, really. So like kind of like the hopefully what we kind of talked about kind of showed where it's like you have kind of like the evolution of the catch wrestling, and so pins, right? The pins were kind of like the main thing. And so even when you see later stuff from like, the United States, right? Farmer Burns and whatnot, in his books, he's talking about the pin a lot. He also talks about submission holds and whatnot. But I think for him, and I think for the majority of wrestlers, right, you're thinking pinning, right? So You're thinking of getting that control over the person, especially at that time, like say like even up until like Farmer Burns time, like the 1800s into the 1900s. You're thinking pinning, and then even those pro wrestlers, they're thinking pins because you see these big, as part of the spectacle of pro wrestling, even modern pro wrestling and stuff, the predetermined stuff. So you're thinking pins, right? But again, you also see people traveling to compete in wrestling. And so you have people from Japan. So you have like the dominant styles. Judo actually is not a very old style, much to the chagrin of judo practitioners. Its evolution is much more modern. But you did have practitioners. It is old enough where you have like judo people competing against like catch wrestlers and stuff. So you do get an additional layer of mixing and stuff later on, right? So, I think So Gridiron Masters say, I don't know if you're referring to, because it's like sometimes people will try to say like, oh, it's judo, and then the Brits took that and whatnot. So, no, like what we're kind of seeing, like, or the evidence is showing, it's like, these mix of European immigrants into the Lancashire region, kind of being the major developers of the style itself over time of catch wrestling. So it wouldn't necessarily be like so much of a mixing of judo or any Japanese style, but more so is very like European. And I think that's one of the things too. I think there's a while back someone was asking about kind of similar about like, oh, you see like some of the submission holds and whatnot. But if you look back at some, because there are some really cool old books. I think I have one on my phone. Really cool old books where they talk about like the art of wrestling, or the science of wrestling and the art of jiu-jitsu. And like, so they in that book, they'll have a section where they talk about wrestling stuff, and then old pictures. And then they'll have the part where they talk about jiu-jitsu, and of course with old pictures and stuff. But I think even then you can kind of see a lot of the differences between the styles. So you really aren't necessarily seeing sit outs or these other kinds of mat wrestling techniques in like traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu and judo and stuff. So there are like, when you kind of see even like the old book side by side, judo is, and traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu, it truly is its own thing. Even though they had contact, and competition kind of early on. Actually, yeah. So Gridiron Masters just commented again, followed up. So let's go and talk about that. Actually, let me see if I can. Oh, I think. Well, let's try this. I think I can show it on stream. There we go. So Gridiron Masters, I don't even go for subs that much anymore. Usually because I have to give up pressure to get a submission. Very true. Very true. Yes, if you're up against a very good wrestler, and which I think we're starting to see in modern jiu-jitsu. So like in ADCC, a lot of modern jiu-jitsu practitioners who want to compete in there, they're actually calling ADCC a wrestling competition, right? Because pretty much I think it's legal to wear a gi if you want, but nobody does. It's just really evolved into this no-gi thing. And I think because a lot of them really don't know wrestling, so this whole emphasis on emphasis away from gi makes them think it's like a wrestling competition. So anyway, a lot of good wrestlers. That's why, like, I think nowadays the Americans are kind of doing very, very well in these types of competitions, where at least there is enough folk style wrestling and stuff that it's getting incorporated into a lot of the jiu-jitsu schools. So you are seeing this evolution of I guess like what was originally Brazilian jiu-jitsu into this kind of American-like jiu-jitsu style that you're seeing in the likes of ADCC. And even like one championship is having like that kind of it's really interesting. Where we're having some of the best Americans who are like these really great like champions in grappling, and they're competing against. I think they're doing like a thing right now where it's like a lot of the best Americans going up against these sambo practitioners, and they aren't necessarily dominating in the wrestling aspect, but they are dominating in like leg locks and stuff like that. So um, you're seeing this kind of this evolution, but it um, it isn't like we're going back to like gridiron masters comment where it's like giving up. So he said, I don't go for subs that much anymore. It's because you give up pressure to get a submission. So so modern jiu-jitsu or modern nogi is still different from wrestling, right? So to answer gridiron masters, is like, yeah, if you are up against a very good wrestler, if you relieve that pressure, chances are they're going to find some way to escape, right? So what you're probably going to want to do, and if you were, and it's kind of going back to like old time catch wrestling where there was no time limit and you can just go until someone wins, right? So then that is like the best strategy. Like if you can hold them down, make them worn out from trying to escape, then eventually they'll get tired enough where if you had to submit them or pin them, you got it, right? Okay, so gridiron masters, I think this works. Okay, so next comment. I don't even call it jiu-jitsu anymore. At most, it's a rule set where there are no pins. Yeah, so I think especially in the United States, since we have a very strong wrestling or amateur wrestling tradition, then we are getting we're getting this mix, right, of amateur wrestling into nogi jiu-jitsu, and I think there's like one school, right, it's kind of getting into the news where you're getting a lot of successful competitors coming out of that. It's called like Daisy Fresh, right? So Daisy Fresh Jiu-Jitsu, or I think they're calling themselves American Jiu-Jitsu. So that might be kind of going along what Gridiron Masters is talking about, where you're having this folk style wrestling mixing with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, creating this this more wrestling oriented style of nogi. But again, I personally wouldn't call it catch wrestling. And actually, I've trained at a Daisy Fresh, and so yeah, it's still it's still a lot of the jiu-jitsu stuff. There's still a lot of people doing like the De La Hiva stuff, playing guard. So there's still. I'd personally say it's probably still more heavy on the jiu-jitsu stuff, right? Because I think that you can kind of take advantage of the whole no pin stuff. So then people they kind of just forget about going to their back, and like they'll just go to their back, so they'll just give up that whole idea. Gridiron Masters, what's wrong with submission wrestling as a name? That's what I'm saying. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And at UCLA, we're kind of using that name too for the class, because for the catch wrestling class, because more people will understand submission wrestling. So like a person who doesn't know what catch wrestling is, like since it is a specific name, right? They might not know what that is, so then they might not come to the class or they might not check it out. But if we have submission wrestling, then they're like, oh, I kind of like, at least I have some idea, and so then they'll come to the class, or at least they'll come check it out, right? And then they'll just continue, because it's the best of both worlds, right? And really kind of like the future, right? Because especially catch wrestling nowadays, where we got from like Wiggins and stuff, and from like Billy Wicks, or the American lineage, right, from Farmer Burns and all that. You got all these really great control, like painful submission holds and stuff, which really they're wrestling holds. They've all, like, a lot of these double wrist locks and key locks and stuff like that were all considered holds that you can use to control someone, so you can pin them. But it just so happens that people tap out. So the whole idea is kind of a little bit different, or at least the idea of wrestling from back in the day is a little bit different, I think, nowadays because of jiu-jitsu being so popular. So then a lot of things that maybe someone wouldn't have tapped out to back in the glory days of catch wrestling, people are tapping out to now, which is great. Great for someone who knows like the catch wrestling. Okay, so here's another comment from someone else. All right. Okay, Dal Av. There are also false theories about Savat coming from Asian martial arts. Also, with sailors being involved, seems like people appreciate sailors mixed with false theories. Yeah. Strange. But I mean, yeah, France was like definitely a colonial power and stuff like that. So they were all over different parts like Africa and Asia and all that. But again, human civilization has been around for a while, and people like to fight, and so they develop different styles. So things influence each other. So like we've seen, like the influence of the pin was a back and forth between England, or like the island and the continent. But it was still very much a European thing. A very like a European development, like that they did all by themselves. So it's not necessarily an influence from, say, like, since Japan has the sumo or whatever, holding someone or making someone fall over and you win. No, they had those rules in England too. If you get someone to fall over, you won. And then it just developed into like falling over and landing on them and keeping them down. Then that evolved. That changed the rules in Europe. All right, Gridiron Masters. Is there a difference between temporary pins and immobilizing pins? Depends on the rules. So in our competitions, like and in the competitions that Wigan has, it's a 2-second pin. So you keep those shoulders on the mat 2 seconds, you won. So I think I think in judo, I think they have kind of a thing where you stay over somebody, then you can like for like 10 seconds or something, but it's definitely something a little different. But yeah, it doesn't mean that that judo brought the pins into. So judo, again, it's a very young style. So no, I would say that. So then with that being said, since judo is not a very old martial art, it definitely wasn't old enough to influence pins in Europe hundreds of years ago. Hey, Marcus James. So thanks for watching. Hopefully you heard some of the older stuff, or some of the stuff from the beginning of the podcast here. We're just talking about the evolution of the pin in Europe and how it was a back and forth between Europe and England, and then ultimately people kind of recognized the value of holding someone down on their back and being very deliberate about it, showing the dominance by holding them down, by pinning them down. And then that ultimately remained in the French style, which became Greco-Roman. And then that also ended up remaining in the catch as catch can, which evolved in Lancashire. So so Marcus is he competes and trains at Snake Pit Wigan, right? So he's been doing grappling for a while now. All right, but so again, with that being said, again, the pin, or it's like so people saw the value of the pins a long time ago, and so hopefully people nowadays can kind of redevelop their appreciation of pins. Um, because you'll see some people saying like, "Oh, wrestling, whatever, it sucks because I like jujitsu because the pin is valueless." But no, it's got a lot of value there, right? And so that's why the modern jujitsu gurus are talking about it. Gridiron Masters. I like pins that can't be escaped from. Jiu-jitsu people laugh at 2-second pins. A whole jiu-jitsu match can be one long pin. Yes, yes, especially some of the gi ones where you just kind of like hang on to each other. So I think that's why people are really liking a lot of the no gi stuff, because at least you can't just hang on to the clothes the whole time. All right. So hopefully people got the gist of what we're talking about. And so if you want to support us, it'd be great if anybody want to support us through becoming a member of our channel, at our YouTube channel, that'd be great. We also offer like extra videos and stuff there. If you want to learn, again, we have this really cool new app on our membership, right? So one that you can download, and it's way more active now. So it's pretty cool. Let me see. Oh, the last Ronin. Oh, and Marcus James. Didn't Barnett essentially beat Dean Lister with the pin? Yeah, just holding him down. That he welcomed being on his back, right? So that's kind of how it worked. The last Ronin. Actually, let me show. So the last Ronin. Is there a place for the pin in the modern game? Yes, yes. Yes, there's definitely a place for that, and that's why you're seeing people like John Danaher talk about like the pin itself. And so basically, you don't necessarily have to pin the person where it's like what you like side control, what's called side control in jiu-jitsu, but it is you can pin down a part of the limb, an entire limb, the hip, or any part of the body where if you can immobilize that, that might help you to get into like basically passing their guard, or going into a side control, or setting up, or basically immobilizing them long enough where you can set up a leg lock or something like that. So that is the value of the pin in like modern no-gi. So for those of you, and I think I mentioned it earlier, like also modern MMA, where it's like if you can hold someone, if you take someone down, you hold them down, and then you can ground and pound until you get that TKO. I think we talked about it. There was like a really cool one championship match. There was a Indonesian freestyle wrestler against a really good Muay Thai guy, and so then the Indonesian freestyle wrestler did like a fireman's takedown on the guy against the cage, and then was able to hold him down. I believe he got a submission or a ground and pound. Anyway, the freestyle wrestler won, but it was because of that whole idea of wrestling and like being on top, keeping the person underneath immobilized. So yeah, we have that video on our channel, right? I think the guy is called Ekoroni Saputra, right? So you can definitely see that. The video on our YouTube channel it should be pretty funny because I have one of the UCLA students. So this woman, she throws me. So if you want to see me get tossed like that, like in the fight, then check it out. It shouldn't be too long ago. That fight wasn't too long ago. Yeah, so the last Ronin. Yeah, so but where the pin is a means to an end. Yeah, basically. Yeah, so you can show the control, or say like if we're talking about like the Barnett Lister match where you can really be driving your weight into the person, really making it difficult for them to breathe, and you can set up those types of what they call like compression chokes, where you're not even choking them around you're not strangling them around their neck, but they can't breathe, and then they tap out. They tap to pressure, basically. Oh yeah, there we go. Actually, so Marcus James, So great photo with Roy behind you. Yeah, actually, there. If you see over, actually, this way, where my cat is. All right, so that's me, and that was the first catch wrestling event that Wigan held, kind of in the modern era. So I competed in that. How do I get there? We go. I competed in that, and I won. And there I am. See where I'll bring it forward. See if you can see it. Yeah. So uh, there's Roy Wood handing me the trophy for winning. I won by crossface. But then also, speaking of Roy Wood giving me stuff, so yeah, these trophies. But then this one in particular is a really cool one. Since I trained in Wigan for several years, let me see. This is a specific one that Roy made for me. Let me see if I can. So you can see it's not for winning a match. He gave me get the glare off of it. So it's the Roy Wood Trophy. Yes, there we go. Most Improved Wrestler of the Year. So for 2013. So I had already gone. I wasn't a beginner, right? But I'd already gone and won, and then kept going back, and so Roy gave me a specific trophy that it was his award that he chose, who he wanted to give it to, and he gave it to me. So I'm very, very proud of that. So there, my cat likes it too. So, yeah, so that's why I should probably put it where you can see it, huh? It's like directly behind my head. So so Marcus says, Roy said that you're like the most improved wrestler, and but no trophy. Sorry about that. We'll make a certificate for you. Oh, my cat wants to take this photo down. Maybe he doesn't. He's jealous of the trophy. He wants his own. All right. All right. Okay. All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and call it a night here. So thanks everyone for listening and watching. Hopefully you learned a lot about the value of pins and also the evolution of pins and why we do it in catch wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling, folk style wrestling, freestyle wrestling. And you can see how it can be of value still in modern grappling, in MMA, no-gi, so consider learning some catch wrestling. All right. So we'll go ahead and see you next time. So hopefully you take advantage of our YouTube channel or all our different resources on our website. Can elevate your grappling, and then together we keep real wrestling alive.